I'm Rob Port from SayAnythingBlog.com. On the November ballot 2012, one of the measures that passed was Measure 4. It was a ban expanding, or it was a measure expanding North Dakota's smoking ban. And I think that it expanded it in a lot of ways that North Dakotans maybe aren't quite aware of. I think they knew the basic fact. It's going to mean no smoking in more public areas. I think they were down with that. I think they don't maybe understand that there's some peculiar. Now I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. There are some peccadillos in this law, to use a word that I can actually pronounce, that I think are a little strange or a little hard to understand. And so I brought on with me Rudie Martinson. He is the executive director of the North Dakota Hospitality Association. They're an industry group representing bars, representing restaurants, representing hotels, or in other words, a lot of the businesses that are now going to have to deal with this law and its implementation. Rudie, thanks for the time.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Rob. I appreciate it.
You know, Rudie, I wanted to bring you on because, first of all, when does this law take effect? When are people going to have to start abiding by it?
It takes effect on December 6th.
So that's not far.
A week from this coming Thursday.
Yeah, that's not very far in the future. Now, tell us what specifically, because I read the law. I looked it up on the Secretary of State's website, and I read the details of the law, and it's pretty complicated. Can you give us? Obviously we know that it expands the number of places you can't smoke. You can't smoke in any bar now. You can't smoke in basically any business that's open to the public. Can't smoke there at all. But run us through some of the parts of this law that people in your industry are having trouble understanding at this point.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The effect of the law itself on the surface is pretty clear. Basically what it does is it says you can't smoke anymore indoors in places of employment. It also includes a lot of places that have traditionally been exempted from those types of laws. And the most obvious one of those that people identify with right away is bars. And so I think when a lot of people went to vote on it, they said, okay, yeah, we agree that they shouldn't allow smoking in bars anymore. So they voted yes. Well, if you read the law a little more closely, some of the other places that are traditionally exempted from this kind of legislation are actually included this time. And that includes things like individual sleeping rooms in hotels. Hotels won't be able to offer rooms where smoking is allowed to their guests anymore. It includes things like tobacco stores where all they sell is tobacco, cigar stores, those kinds of things. It includes hookah shops or hookah bars, which
let me stop you there, because I want to talk about that for a minute, because that's interesting to me. There are some bars, and I don't know how many there are, because it's not really, I'm not a smoker myself. It's not really my thing. I know there's one here in Minot. And I think there's a few in some other communities around the state, and there's some tobacco shops. But these are establishments that exist specifically to cater to a smoking clientele. Like the one here in Minot, I know, is specifically a cigar bar. So if you like to sit around with friends and have a drink and smoke cigars, that's a place you can go. Like, that's who they cater to. They sell cigars. They sell alcohol. If you want to go and have a few drinks and smoke a cigar, that's a place you can go. Non-smokers obviously know this probably isn't a place I want to go, because it exists specifically to cater to smokers. Those sorts of places are going to be shut down now.
That's true. And actually, in the case of hookah bars, they're called hookah bars. They aren't always bars in the sort of traditional sense. If you don't know what a hookah is, it's a big glass thing with tubes coming out of it, and it sort of looks like a petrified octopus, sort of. But you put some tobacco in the top, and a lot of those hookah places all over the country, and they're not real common in North Dakota. There are a few of them, but essentially what they do is you go there for the experience of smoking this tobacco out of this device, and it's flavored, and it has, you can get multiple flavors of tobacco, and there's a system. It's a different tobacco smoking experience. And in a lot of cases, at least around the country, those bars don't necessarily serve alcohol like you think of in a traditional sense of a bar. I mean, the whole reason you go there is for this hookah tobacco smoking experience. And that is no longer legal under state law in North Dakota as of December 6th. Those places will either, I imagine they'll shut down. I mean, I can't see them forcing their clientele to come and buy their tobacco and then carry this huge glass device 20 feet from the front door to stand outside in the middle of the winter. So, yeah, effectively it shuts down that type of business model. It also, there's a provision in the law. The law says you can't smoke in enclosed spaces anymore. And there's an interesting provision of the law that talks about, that defines what exactly an enclosed space is. And, you know, as a lot of cities in North Dakota have enacted individual bans that ban smoking in bars at the local city or local community level. And in many of those cases, the voters or the city commissions, whoever's enacted that, have seen fit to still allow for a smoking shelter or a smoking hut, you know, a place that's not a part of the bar, where employees don't have to go, that's sort of semi-outdoor. A lot of the time it's partially enclosed. Essentially, it's a wind shelter, or a place for smokers.
A place where if you're going to smoke outside in the North Dakota winter, you can go and get a little shelter from the elements.
Right. I mean, some of them are enclosed on only two sides. Some of them have a wall that's only halfway up and a ceiling. But yeah, it's out of the elements a little bit. And you know, this provision, this new ballot measure, defines enclosed as having more than 33% of the perimeter of structure enclosed by anything. And I read it and talked to a couple of attorneys about it. And, you know, from what I have been able to gather, and there hasn't been any kind of official ruling on this or anything yet, but from what I've been able to gather, enclosed means enclosed by chain link. It means enclosed by essentially anything. So, you know, many of these smoking shelters that are legal under the local ordinance in Fargo, for example, or the local ordinance in Grand Forks, are now explicitly made illegal under this new smoking law that we've passed via the statewide ballot.
That's interesting, because we're talking about, I mean, I'm not sure that a lot of people who even maybe don't like smoking are going to go to the extent where we're not even, if the smokers are going to go outside, they're not even allowed to have halfway around them any sort of like plywood or something like that to block the wind and the snow. That I'm not sure how many people realize that was in the law. You mentioned something else that was interesting. It was a 20-foot rule. And there were some interesting things when I read the law, some interesting things about that as far as the 20-foot rule, because you can't smoke within 20 feet of any door or even a drive-up window of a business. Now, I've been in drive-through lines, and I see people smoking in their cars as they go through the drive-through. And the penalty for violating this is that you can have your occupational license, your business license, or what have you, removed, by my understanding, the reading of the law, if you violate this law. So if I'm smoking in the drive-through, going through the bank line, or going through the pharmacy line, or going through the fast food line, could that business get in trouble for me smoking in my car while going through that line?
Well, again, I'm not an attorney, and there are not any official rulings on that specific question that I'm aware of yet. But I will tell you that the law does say smoking, if it's happening, has to be 20 feet, at least 20 feet away from any door, any operable window is what the law reads. So any window that opens, any ventilation intake or ventilation system. So, you know, to me, a drive-through window is indeed an operable window. It opens. And so if you're less than 20 feet from it, that's against the law. The law also says that there's a provision in there that says they can restrict or remove or repeal any operating license that a business has. And I think that provision is obviously written to target liquor licenses, so that if there are bar owners or restaurant owners that repeatedly violate this, then, their liquor license can be threatened. But the law doesn't say, it doesn't limit it to that. It says any business license. So, and that part of it is sort of scary to me, to tell you the truth. I mean, now we can, and there's some question too about who is responsible for policing this. If I own Rudie's Tavern and I say, okay, you can't smoke here anymore, and I throw everybody outside, do I just have to post a sign that says you have to be 20 feet away from the door? Do I have to paint a line on my sidewalk that says this is 20 feet and you have to smoke on the other side of this line? Do I have to employ somebody to stand out there and actively chase people away from my ventilation ducts? I mean, whose responsibility is it? Is because there is a provision in the law for individual smokers to be ticketed and fined for violating this rule. But there's also the provision that says the business owner can be fined and have their license jerked. So, I mean, if I own the tavern, is it my responsibility, or to what extent do I have to make sure that I'm self-policing this law? And to what extent is it on the unruly smoker who doesn't have any respect for the law?
That's an interesting question, especially given how many bars can be in like downtown areas that have a lot of common space out in front. Like if you're a bar and you're in a downtown area, is it your job to police the smokers on the sidewalk in front of your place? If somebody walks by smoking a cigarette, are you responsible for that? It's not real clear under this law. Also, who's in charge? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would also add that if I chase them away from the front door of my establishment and they're standing in front of the front door of the retail store next door, is it then the retail store's responsibility to come out and chase them away from the front of their entrance, or whose responsibility is that?
That's a good question. Who is going to be enforcing this law? I mean, is this something that law enforcement officers are asked to do, or is there public health officials that are tasked with doing this? Or how does the enforcement work?
Well, that's not really clear either. I mean, I would think that if someone's going to come down and write you a ticket for smoking too close to the front door of this hypothetical Rudie's bar that we're talking about, I would imagine that person has to be a law enforcement officer. That being said, there's also a provision in the law that's written into the same section as the requirement that you have to be 20 feet away from that laundry list of openings in your building that I recited, that says if you can prove that there's no risk of smoke infiltrating into the interior if people are closer than that, you can petition for, say, a variance to that, and you can have people at 15 feet rather than 20 if you can somehow prove that. Now, the authority that you appeal to on that is not local law enforcement. It's your local public health unit or your local public health district. So, I mean, that indicates to me that they are going to have some sort of enforcement capacity or some sort of, governing authority over this is going to rest with your local public health unit if they're the ones that you have to petition to for an exemption or a variance of any kind. So I'm not sure is the complete or the most concise answer. But I would think that at least those two entities would have to have a role in it, since that's the way that the law is written.
What sort of things? I mean, obviously, your industry, we're just a little more than a week out from this being the law of the state, meaning that 2 weeks from now, business owners that you represent could be ticketed or charged or punished essentially under this law. And yet we seem to have a lot of I think what we revealed through this interview is that we have a lot of very unclear parts of this law. What sort of things is your industry doing to try to clarify this, to get this down to some, set of if I do X, Y is going to happen, so that it's something predictable that business owners can comply with?
Well, predictable would be the ideal situation. And, we're going through and trying to get answers to some of these questions. And I have shared with you today, and I actually shared with my membership earlier today through some communications with them, what we know so far about it. What I worry about is that if your local public health department or your local law enforcement agencies are going to be involved in enforcement of this, What I worry about is that it will be a state law that is enforced differently in each local area, which, as a statewide organization, as an industry, that's kind of hard for us when the goalposts are always moving. And that's been sort of the history of the smoking ban as it has passed in the state of North Dakota anyway. Initially they just wanted to ban smoking in restaurants, and okay, that was fine. That's all we want. And then they wanted to ban smoking in bars, and okay, that's all we want. And now, they're coming after the outdoor smoking areas. And is that all they want? I don't know. I don't know to what extent those that would like to ban smoking in the state are willing to go. But, I have to imagine it's going to be enforced slightly differently in every local area, depending on the resources and the willingness to deal with the practicality of going out and enforcing it in each local area. So, I don't know. I don't know that I can say definitively and consistently this is how the law is going to be enforced statewide, and that's very frustrating from an industry standpoint.
Let me. I wanted to ask you this question too, because there's a and this will be the last question. There's also a provision of the law which pertains to vehicles that can be considered a work area. So obviously, if you own a business and you've got work vehicles and your employees are driving these vehicles around, not only can they not be allowed to smoke in the vehicle, but there has to be a placard posted inside the vehicle saying no smoking, visible from the outside. So that's an expense. That's more compliance there. But there's an interesting question of what about employers who, reimburse employees for using their own vehicles? Like I know, maybe a lot of pizza delivery services or other delivery services maybe reimburse people for their mileage or something for using their own cars. Is that now saying that when people are using their own car on work time, they can't smoke? And do those people who use their car for work, are they going to have to post signage in their cars?
That's another aspect that's not really clear to me either. And you're right. The law does say that the signage that's posted on the vehicle, if I own, for example, let's say I pick up garbage. I have a company that picks up garbage. So all my guys drive around in garbage trucks that I own. I then clearly under the law have to post a sign that is visible from the outside of that vehicle that says that smoking is not allowed in that. Whether that's always been my company policy or not, whether that's never been my company policy or not, it now has to be the policy. And I have to post a sign that says so. And this is true of every business, by the way. It's not just true of hospitality businesses. It's true of the garbage collection example is a great one. If you have that kind of company where it's vehicle based like that and you own all the vehicles, you are going to be impacted by the signage requirements in this measure. In terms of the pizza delivery thing, if I own Rudie's Pizza and I pay 5 people to deliver pizzas in their own vehicles, but it's their job and they have to spend their work time in their vehicle, I don't know the answer to that. And I haven't seen any kind of ruling on that either. It seems a little ludicrous to me that if I'm employing you and you're in your own vehicle and you want to smoke a cigarette in it, that doesn't bother me at all. But, I don't know how that's viewed under this new law. And it may take us having to implement the law and have somebody complaining about it to figure it out. So
it makes you wonder about home offices too. As somebody who works from home, if I wanted to light up a cigarette in my home office, am I violating the law because I'm smoking in my workspace?
Actually, my understanding is you're not, as long as you're the only person that works there. So even if you had, I don't know, let's say you did custom something. You had a shop that you worked in. You make furniture, and you have a shop that you work in. If you're the only person that works there, you can still work in your shop. But if you have another person that works there with you, that's a no smoking area now.
Wow. Well, obviously a lot of questions yet to be answered about this law. And again, I'm not real sure how many of these questions North Dakota voters knew about when they cast their ballots for this thing. But as you say, the law is going to be implemented now, and we're going to have to find out how it's going to be implemented in some of these areas. Rudie, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm happy to do it anytime.